Hello, I'm Daniela. In today's video, I'm going to show you the interesting process of painting on tea bags. Now you can use used tea bags or fresh tea bags, whichever works for you. The fabric of the tea bag is very interesting. It's fairly durable, surprisingly, and it looks great when you collage it onto papers. The tea bag is somewhat translucent, so you might get a little bit of the background peeking through. But today's video isn't about the collage process. That will be another video. Today's video is just about creating this little fodder to use, using the tea bags, and painting these beautiful tropical inspired flowers. I really enjoyed this process and I can't wait to show you how I did it. So let's get started. So tea bag material, the kind where you get tea leaves in, you dip it in the hot water or let it steep, they come in different shapes and sizes. I have some unusual ones that are just little round tea bags, and you can get the standard square ones. The fabric, the tea bag itself, is kind of durable if you think about it, and it makes a great medium for painting. You can either just cut away your tea bag before you use it, like I did in this one, or you can salvage them after you make a cup of tea, and they have a little bit of color. This one has a lot of color because it was a black tea. And if you can't find the round ones, you don't have to worry about that or even fret. You can use little square standard tea bags and just paint on them or even cut it into a round shape. Today I'm going to show you how I make the most of these round tea bags with these beautiful tropical flowers reminiscent of hibiscus. So the first thing we need to do is get our tea bag, and I'll show you how I remove the tea leaves and get it to the right shape. Now the procedure is the same whether you use brewed tea bags or just fresh ones right from the container. You just want to separate both sides of this round tea bag, and then I make a little snip with my scissors. From there, I'll cut around the perimeter, careful to only cut through one layer. I take it really slow and move cautiously. This way I won't cut through the different layers or wreck the shape of this round tea bag. You can use the same procedure with square tea bags just as easily. I like to shake off most of the leaves from inside the tea bag, and then I'll continue cutting around. Not only does this help me make a more accurate cut, but my scissors won't be cutting through the tea leaves. I'll continue cutting around until I get that nice round shape. And if I'm using a square tea bag and I want a round shape, I'll just empty the tea bag and then trace around that tea bag with a template, and then cut out the circle. I'm really happy with the way this looks and this shape. So there I have my tea bag. I've already removed the leaves, and now it's ready to start painting. You could paint on it, although it does bleed through because this is a filter after all. So what I like to do is take a little clear gesso. Just take a little bit and brush it onto the tea bag, and I let that dry. Because it's a clear gesso, it will dry clear. I just paint it down using my silicone tool here. Make sure I get right through all that filter. And when I pull it up from my silicone mat, you can see a little bit of it remains, and that's okay. Clean that up. The reason I like using a silicone tool instead of a brush is because when it needs to be cleaned, I can just take a damp paper towel and wipe all the excess off. Gesso is particularly thick, and if it gets in between the bristles of a brush and you don't clean it in time, well, it'll ruin your brush. So I do feel like the silicone tool is really worth it. Same thing with the silicone mat. Of course, you don't need it. It's a complete option. And I'll just let this dry. So once my tea bag is gessoed over and dried, you can't really even tell that anything was done to it. The paint will still bleed through, but with much less bleed through. So it's important to keep using your silicone mat or parchment paper or something underneath it. Even paper would be fine. So now to make these flowers, they're 5 petals. They're basically 5 hearts with some leaves and a center. So what I like to do is just make 5 little spokes coming out from here. And you can make them small. I like to fill up most of that tea bag. But again, that's optional. It makes it really personal. After I have my 5 spokes, then I just kind of make that little heart shape around each one. coming around. And I can play with it a little more. You can overlap petals if you want. For this technique, because it's very simple, I don't like to overlap petals, but you certainly can. It makes a very interesting effect. So I have my petals here. I'm not going to sketch out the leaves just yet. I want to create my first layer of that background color. And I like to use an off-white. I feel with the tea-dyed paper here, which even if it isn't dyed with tea, it's still a little off color, the cream color paint works better. So I like to take a small brush and I take my acrylic paint and I'm just going to start on each one of these. And you'll see as I paint underneath the tea bag as I move it, that the paint still goes through the tea bag. It just takes me a moment. Painting all around that shape, getting that nice shape and pulling it to the center. And at this point, if I want to make a little variation or I want to change the shape so it's not quite all the same size or width, this is the time to do it. And as you can see, I have a little bit of the paint coming through the back. It's okay. I just keep moving it around and I'll finish painting all of these. Now these are not evenly spaced. They're not all the same size. They just have a lot of the same characteristics. And I think that makes for a very interesting result, very interesting flower. It doesn't have to be completely opaque, although you're more than welcome to go and make a second coat. Right now I have to let this dry. So now that my tea bag is dried, I can choose my colors. Here I have each of the colors of the rainbow, and this one I use a turquoise instead of a green. And for the turquoise, I just chose 3 shades, a dark, a medium, and a light. Of course, you can vary this and change it however you like. If you only have the dark, you can just add different degrees of the cream to make the medium or the light. I like to start with the lightest color, and again on my brush. And I start from the center, and I just stroke out from the center, pulling that all the way across the petal. I'll start 3 times, then I'll go 4. And I'm not looking to fill in the entire petal, maybe 3/4 of it. And then I'll switch over here to the next one and do this on all 5 of the petals. Now we're going to build up the color as you see in the samples. But I like to have this lightest color down first. If you make any mistakes and you fill it up too much, that's all right, because we still have some of that cream on the palette. And being acrylic paint, you can just paint over it when it dries. So now I'm going to come in here with my next color. The paint hasn't dried, that's okay. And I'm just going to press out from that center. Again, just trying to make a little bit of a layer, and you'll see the variation. Still some of that lighter color is sticking out, and it makes a beautiful variation. I like to always go in the same direction, out from the middle, and not perfectly straight lines. They have a little bit of an arc to them. Now if you find that you've colored over your lighter color, just go back and just pull a few little brush strokes of that lighter color out from the center. You might not need to do that, but if you like that variation, that kind of gradient that we're getting, then this is the way to do it. They all look good except for this one, so I'm going to come back in with that medium color and just press over it. Just enough so that it doesn't look so forced. So now I'm going to come in with my darkest color. Start from the center and just pull out. I'll do that on all of the petals. Now I really like how this came out. If in fact I felt I had too much of my, in this case, turquoise, I would just dip into my cream and kind of just pull back just to make some of that color a little bit lighter. It doesn't take a lot, and it's not even necessary, but if you want that look, that variation, that's what you do. So now I want to work on the leaves. The leaves are really simple. They're just little lines of green, little shapes. So I like to look for some of the areas that have the largest openings, and then I just make an organic shape that comes to a point. This one I might have a leaf fall over the side, and this one come out here. So now to paint my leaves, I have two colors of green, a darker green and a lighter green. So now to paint the leaves, I take the darkest green, and that's the first layer. I want to paint over each leaf, carving out the shape, and I can alter it if I really want to as well, following the edge of that petal, filling it in, and then with the lighter green, I come right to the edge and just add a little of the lighter green. Now I don't want it to just sit on top of that, so I'll clean my brush just on the side of the plate, take a little bit of that dark green and just kind of blend so I get a little highlight of the leaf. And I'll do this with the remaining leaves. Carve out the shape, fill it in. Really bring that to a point at the end. And then come in there with a little of that lighter green. And if it doesn't work out perfectly, I just come in here and blend it a little bit with that darker green. And I'll do that on all the leaves. And so then I've finished the leaves. Of course, you can add more leaves if you want. Every time you add paint to your piece, you might get a little on the background. I'll let this dry, then we'll work on the final center of this flower. So to make the center, I have a little black craft paint here on my palette, and then I go through my brushes and find the end that I want. I don't want the absolute smallest size, maybe just very close. I will dip my brush end, and then I'll just kind of stamp a few of these little shapes. They can overlap a little. They don't have to be symmetrical. It's totally what you want to do. I need to let this dry a little. It doesn't have to be completely dry, but I want to add a little bit of a highlight into each one of those. So to add the highlight on the mostly dry black center, I just take my smallest brush, dip it in the cream color, and then I'm just going to very gently dab on all those little black dots we made. And the result is a beautiful little painted tropical flower on a tea bag that I can use in my journals. I'll do a future video where I show exactly how I use them, the technique I use for that. But the first thing I needed to do is create a stash of little tea bags that are painted that I can use. So that's how I painted on tea bags. In a future video, I'll show you how I use them in collage. It's really interesting to build up your supplies and then use handmade materials. If you found this video helpful, please give it a thumbs up and be sure to subscribe. And thank you for joining me today.